Good morning, Steve. Welcome to Conversations with BrandKnew. Thank you for doing this for us. And before we go further on, would you like to share something about a bit about your background? What you've been doing all these years and where you stand today.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on here and a pleasure to be talking to you, Suresh.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Harrison. I am a copywriter. I started as a copywriter at Ogilvy and Mather Direct when I was 30 years of age. I became head of copy and creative director, became unmanageable and had to start my own agency. Were merged, and my agency did a reverse takeover of the London agency Wunderman and became HTW and Harrison Troughton Wunderman. We became the best creative shop in the world in our discipline, if you judge it by Cannes Lions and various other awards. I finished my earn out and became unmanageable again and left the industry, left agency life, and have subsequently been writing a bit of copy, helping a few clients, and writing books.
Thank God you became unmanageable, Steve. Okay, because as we know, the juggernaut rolls on. The advertising industry today is statistically, as per Magna Global, estimated at $766 billion and poised to be 1 trillion by 2025. Okay, yeah. And you have a fantastic title. Some of whom would see this to be really, really purposefully provocative or just pure provocative, in terms of can't sell, won't sell. And so in the context of all those number jumbo, I would want to understand the genesis, the inspiration, the trigger point of you writing this book.
Okay. You're absolutely right. $1 trillion business by 2025. I think it's estimated by 2024, 645 billion will be spent on digital alone. But I think my contention, Suresh, it's money not being very well spent. On your ISD Global website, only a couple of weeks ago, you published the research by Anna Tuchman that she's done for Kellogg's into TV advertising, and it's a pathetic story that's being told there across pretty much across the board. Anna indicates that companies simply aren't getting a return on their investment. They're not making the money back on the cost of the advertising. The Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, who are the keepers of the flame of work that works in
gatekeepers.
In our country. And yes, of course, the Effectiveness Awards, yes. 2 years ago, they declared a crisis of creative effectiveness. Okay, and if I may quote to give you the sense of the magnitude of that problem, they indicated that the IPA warned that creatively effective campaigns are now less effective than they have been in the entire 24 run of data, and are now no longer more effective than non-award-winning campaigns. So the big award-winning campaigns at Cannes, at D&AD, at the One Show are now no longer any more effective than the non-award-winning campaigns, where once a creatively awarded campaign would be around 12 times as efficient as non-awarded ones. The multiplier is now in catastrophic decline. Yeah. As another example, Procter & Gamble in 2017 slashed their advertising budget by between $100 and $140 million and noticed no change. The cutting of that budget had no impact upon their revenue.
Absolutely.
Okay? So yes, it's a huge billion-dollar business, but it's money being wasted. And what got to my point is I think we've lost interest in and the ability to build brands that people want to buy. And that is the point. We've lost the ability, and I think the interest in building brands that people want to buy. I was first alerted to this by Patrick Collister, the editor of a wonderful magazine called Directory, and also the owner of the Caples Awards now. And he pointed out to me that in 2019, of the, I think it was the 28 entries that picked up a Grand Prix at Cannes, only 6 of them had increased sales as their objective. Only 6 of them had increased sales as their objective. And you find that if you analyze the big award winners at Cannes, at D&AD, and the One Show, you'll notice that very few of them now have what you might call a commercial purpose, and the majority have got a social purpose. To the extent that of the 43 Cannes Grand Prix winners this year, 35 of those had a social purpose or were cause related. Only 9 of them were aimed at getting somebody to pull a card out of their wallet and actually buy something.
So you have solid reason to be writing that book.
Yes,
add 6 more chapters to it as well, right?
Yeah, I wrote 6 more chapters. I wrote the book just as the pandemic was breaking, I published it initially in the August of 2020 to see advertising's initial response, because I thought that the pandemic was a fabulous opportunity for advertising to play a truly useful role in society by getting the economy working again. You know, kind of by keeping factories open, keeping shops open, keeping restaurants open, keeping people in employment, keeping wages coming in. And it was astounding that nobody in the industry was talking about that crucial social role that advertising could play. And so I followed it up and then wrote a follow-up 12 months later to see whether we came to our senses and assumed our commercial purpose and our role as an economic driver of growth and wages and jobs. And we didn't. We doubled down on social purpose staggeringly.
Right,
you know,
absolutely.
Kind of the awareness of the people in the advertising bubble with the realities faced by people in the mainstream is non-existent, it appeared.
Completely agree. So, you know, just to segue into the next, question that I wanted to ask you, brand purpose, compassionate capitalism, doing good is doing great for brands. Do you reckon that these have all are they well past their sell-by date?
No, I think that corporate social responsibility is something, and a heightened sense of corporate social responsibility is something that cannot be ignored, cannot be avoided, and must be embraced. I think it's good for the planet. It's also good for business. And what is good for business is good for society.
Right.
You know, and again, we must never get away from the fact that what is good for business is good for society.
Right.
When business is booming, society, people prosper, lives get better, lives improve. But I think it's good. The reason why it's good for business is if you've got a good ESG story to tell at the moment as a big multinational, then the stock market loves you. You know, kind of Bloomberg tell us that something like $50 trillion are flowing into those businesses that have got a good ESG story to tell. And in 2 years' time, it looks like being $150 trillion will flow into those companies that have got a good ESG story to tell. So this is wonderful. You know, kind of the stock market, the shareholders will fund many of the advances and breakthroughs and innovations that we need if we're going to fight the climate crisis. This is wonderful. So I'm all in favor of that. But my problem is that good corporate strategy does not always, and actually very rarely, translate into good marketing strategy.
Right. Was it Mark Pritchard from Procter & Gamble who had quoted that by design, we will need to manage purpose with profit?
Yes, yes. Well, of course. I mean, again, let us not get away from the fact that these are businesses. They're not, there's a name for companies that don't have to worry about profit. It's called not for profit.
Yeah.
And there's a clue there in there.
Right.
And anyone else who is,
Not so hidden.
anyone
Yeah.
else, yes, anyone else who is in the business of for profit has got to make a profit. Otherwise,
Right.
all of our laudable intentions will be abandoned.
Absolutely.
So I think for Procter and Gamble to make headlines, and people regard that as headline worthy, indicates just how out of touch the industry is with the basics of what business life is like.
Yeah, I think one of those questions down the line is actually talking about that. So, what I wanted to ask you next was, Steve, politics and advertising. Do the twain meet, and aren't they better served probably at being at loggerheads with each other, or
Yeah.
do you think it is somehow, for the sake of convenience, overlapped?
I think that brands taking political stances, in my view, I think I have no understanding of why an Anglo-Dutch company, Unilever, should get involved in the defunding the police discussion in the United States. But that's what they're doing with Ben and Jerry.
Right.
Why is an Anglo, the defunding the police question is extremely divisive, and it's dangerously divisive. And I have no understanding of why Ben and Jerry, an Anglo-Dutch piece of business, should want to throw a hand grenade into that debate. So apart from the fact that there's the commercial imperative at the back of that, and I think that that is a form of hucksterism, ultimately, that if you are exploiting a divisive issue in society in order essentially to boost your sales, that is a form of hucksterism that I think unparalleled, really, going back to the dark days of advertising's over-promising and hard sell and whatever,
Yeah.
I also think that it ultimately will prove counterproductive, because there's a lot of research that indicates that the effect is asymmetrical, that if your brand takes a political stance, the effect is asymmetrical, that those who agree with that political stance carry on buying the thing anyway, but those who don't agree with that political stance stop buying.
Right.
Okay, so it's asymmetrical. It actually is damaging to the brand.
Absolutely. Wharton's Future of Advertising program had mentioned that, Future of Advertising program 2020 mentioned that time spent with the brand will be the most notable metric going down. Okay, considering there are so many mediums, so many platforms, so many methods to attract, distract, etc., etc.
Yes.
What is your view on this prognosis?
I think given the quality of the advertising that is being presented nowadays, essentially, as I've said, that the award-winning work is not effective, and the direct and digital activation work is dreadful, which, chasing you around the internet, shouting offers at you, chasing you, inescapable.
Spooky.
Yes, I would say the least time this stuff, the customer is exposed to this, the better, to be quite honest. More time spent with the brand. Well, please, if you believe that, then improve the quality of the communication, because at the moment, as the IPA research has indicated, that the brand building work, the big award-winning brand building work, isn't working. Isn't having effect on the public, and I'm damn sure that the sales activation stuff that chases you around the bloody internet, shouting "buy me, buy me, buy me," is not having effect on the on the public. But I think Bob Hoffman, as he usually does, sums this up. When for all of those people who say that time spent with the brand is the most crucial thing that we can do, The average consumer has other things on her mind, like why she gained 2 pounds last week and why her father is looking pale and why the fucking computer keeps losing its Wi-Fi system and why Timmy's teacher wants to see her next week. And what's this bump she noticed on her arm? Okay, so people have better, as Bob is trying to say, people have better things to do or worry about, to concern themselves with than what your brand is doing and how it's trying to integrate or insinuate its way into your life.
Absolutely. I think you just about touched upon the right segue into my next question. Once upon a time, we used to say Martin Luther King or Quit India movement or the Dandi March of Mahatma Gandhi could have been the biggest boycott in history.
Yes.
But actually now it's with more than 650 million devices having ad blocking. The biggest
Yes.
boycott in history is ad blocking. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to ask you, Steve. Is the industry suffering from, as you mentioned, creativity crisis, leadership crisis, or are they completely, probably very misaligned from reality?
Misaligned from the mainstream. May I recommend to you and your many listeners or readers that they download 3 white papers. They're free. They're a quick 10-minute, 15-minute read. They are by Andrew Tenzer and Ian Murray of Reach Research Solutions. They are Gut Instinct. That's Gut Instinct.
Yeah.
The Empathy Delusion. That's the Empathy Delusion, and the Aspiration Window. And I'll give you a taste of what this research indicates. They have discovered in their 3 award-winning studies, we find the same basic pattern being reinforced. I'll start again. We find the same basic pattern being reinforced time and time again. Advertisers and marketers diverge from the mainstream on every major psychological, behavioral, and attitudinal framework that we have explored. They inhabit 2 different worlds.
I think you should provide some links to these 3 papers, definitely. Thank you for sharing this.
Okay. No. It's a wonderful, it's the only research I've seen that's been actually done into the advertising industry and how the industry relates to the mainstream audience that it has lost touch with or doesn't relate to the mainstream audiences. We are a metropolitan university in the United Kingdom. I'll give you my stats if I've got them. Let me see. You must. I told you that I'd end up searching around for these things. But
you're talking about the Metropolitan University of London, the London Metropolitan University?
No. What I'm saying is, for 84% of the agency workforce is aged 18 to 40. So we are overwhelmingly young, youthful, as far as I'm concerned, bloody youth. 88% have a degree or an MA. 88% of us have a degree or an MA, okay? 70% grew up in a household where the chief income earner was social grade AB. That compares with just 29% of modern mainstream. Okay, 14% of us have got a Black, Asian, or mixed ethnicity background, but 70% of those people are privately educated. So there is no diversity. We may have people from different supposedly ethnic backgrounds, but there is no diversity. We all share the same values. We all share the same opinions. We talk to each other. We all work in London. 90 to 95% of the people who work for the big 6 network agencies work in London. It will be the same in New York, in America, Australia, around the world. Those countries, like I was talking to a gentleman from Spain who says that the people in Spain the people who work in the agencies in Spain have absolutely no contact with working class people whatsoever. Can they regard themselves as part of a multinational community who share the same values? And as far as advertising is concerned, they look up to what's happening in America, what's happening in the United Kingdom, and they mirror and mimic what is being done there. And what is being done there is what is being done there wins at Cannes. So everyone just wants to do what wins at Cannes. And this is an indication of just how committed the advertising industry really is to social justice. Okay. In 2017, at the height of the refugee crisis, there was a refugee crisis of people coming into Europe.
Right.
There were 67 entries alerting the world to that crisis at Cannes. 67 entries, all about, it's like you couldn't look, 67 entries. The following year, there were 33 entries. And the following year, 1 entry. This is how committed. The refugee crisis, believe me, got worse.
Only escalated,
because
yeah.
it was no longer making the headlines. People in the advertising industry had moved on to Me Too the following year and Black Lives Matter the year after that.
Yeah, we're always hunting for the next shiny object.
The next shiny object, the next headline-seeking campaign is about as genuine as Father Christmas.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you mentioned about the 6 big network agencies. We don't have to name them, and they're only, listed companies, and so do most of the brands that they do work for. They also have, listed companies. So the presumption is that it's very much shareholder aligned, right?
Yeah.
In terms of hitting quarterly numbers, come what may.
Yes.
Right. And in that context, I just wanted to figure out, I know you're not sitting on the fence, and kudos to you for that. Your book, Can't Sell, Won't Sell. And the current context of hitting quarterly numbers, both at the agency level and at the brand level. How do you kind of correlate that?
I think that the big six operations, they use their creative advertising agencies now as window dressing. Or I would describe it as it's becoming a cottage industry. Okay, you look at the creative agencies, and Campaign asked 12 months ago, is there any future for them? Okay, they make their money out of user experience. They make their money out of digital. They make their money out of the direct. They're doing the direct and sales activation rubbish that I've just been criticizing. That's where they're making their money. But as far as the big creative, and this is what worries me, Suresh, as far as the cottage industry that should be building the brands that people want to buy, this is what happened. I interviewed people from those big agencies, and this is a guy called Dino Myers-Lamptey who had been at MullenLowe Media Hub, and he said that planning has become very unfulfilling at big agencies because people attach themselves to meaty global accounts to justify their positions. And I would hasten to secure their positions.
Right.
Okay. You become part of the brickwork of one of those monoliths. It's difficult to prize you out because if you're in a meeting with 20 people, no one remembers who actually made the mistake.
Right.
And he said, but working on such accounts is not enjoyable because people, quote, can't necessarily see the impact of their work that quickly. Another former network employee told me, on these global accounts, quote, and this is baffling, he says, the work is just part of the toolkit of retention. Efficacy isn't a determinant of success. Just getting to the other side of the black hole with the clients still on board is the aim. The work is just part of the toolkit of retention. Retention. Efficacy isn't a determinant of success. Just getting to the other side of the black hole with the client still on board is the aim. I think it's possible to work in a network agency, produce work for 5 years and have absolutely no blessed clue if it sold anything.
Absolutely.
But may I hasten to add that that when I did my research, it's a totally different story out in the regions. in Leeds and Manchester and Bristol and Glasgow and wherever, and Cardiff, where the agencies are much more attuned to the entrepreneurial ethic and requirements of their smaller regional clients, okay, where those clients, those businesses are totally reliant upon that advertising washing its face.
So obviously they escape the albatross of systemic thinking, right?
Yes, yeah. Well, the systemic thinking for them is commercial purpose.
Right. Right.
Kind of the systemic thinking for them. They're exposed. They're exposed to a much more diverse set of opinions, and that part of that diversity is a client coming in on a Friday afternoon saying, "Has my advertising worked?"
Right.
So there's greater diversity there, and also it's quite possible that the people who are working in those agencies do not share the progressive liberal views of the people who work in the bigger shops. Realize that this is a very highly left-leaning liberal progressive industry at its core, in the bigger in the metropolitan core. And I am of the opinion that we can know that the people in that bubble can no longer bring themselves to stoke capitalism's engine of growth and consumerism. How do they speak? How do they meet up with their friends on a Friday night at, kind of in Islington and Chiswick, and admit to working advertising? Well, they found a way. They found a way of triangulating their way out of that. They say they're saving the bloody world.
Absolutely. You mentioned about opinion. I want to ask you. I think. So was the premise, that advertising is meant to either mold or change public opinion. But do you think it has departed from that and doing something else totally?
I don't think advertising is designed to change or mold public opinion. I don't think that that's necessarily its role. I think that, as with most popular culture, and advertising is an aspect of popular culture, if you are ahead of the curve, if you are ahead of the mainstream set of values, with a film, a play, a book, or a piece of advertising, you are not going to sell in volume, right? Okay, if you're ahead of the curve, if you are taking a radical stance, trying to shift the value, the core values of the mainstream. Not that advertising, I think, has any right to try and shift the core values of the mainstream, but if that is your intent, then I don't think you're going to achieve in volume, in scale. And let's be honest about this. The majority of the business that keeps advertising agencies open only does that if it shifts, if it's aimed at achieving scale and volume. Okay, so so I don't think advertising's role is to be ahead of the curve. Okay, I think it is a mirror to society, not a door through which society should progress to a better, brighter future.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that's a very nice way of putting it as well. Something small departure, I wanted to ask you this, and this is very personal. I always feel that copywriting, okay, and you're a very seasoned one at that, is a very
nice way of putting it.
under-recognized, under-respected, and thereby a little suboptimally rewarded kind of profession within the gamut of the advertising ages.
Yes.
What do you have to say?
I think that's a function of advertising, people who work in advertising losing faith in the fact that it can be used to persuade people. That I think advertising can be used to persuade people that a product or service can be beneficial to them. Okay, in the days when advertising was seen as a form of competitive persuasion, all of the great agencies were founded by copywriters.
Yeah.
And copywriting was the most important function in
The
the
more to
agency.
glamorous
And
function
the
within
most
the
glamorous, to be the writer. You've only got to look at Mad Men.
Right,
The heroes of that show are the writers. But I think advertising has lost either faith. No, I think that I think it aligns with my view that people who work in advertising do not want to be seen in the grubby end of selling. And copywriting is the grubby end of selling. You come up with a big creative idea to grab people's attention and get them to engage. But once they've engaged, you then need to translate that interest into, as we know, desire, conviction, action. Okay. Right. And because we no longer want to be involved with the grubby end of sales or the pernicious form of persuasion, then we just leave it. Oh, we've got their attention. Send them to the bloody website, and then they can read the content.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I was coming to that actually. Just to dovetail into that. Do you think digital is actually taken a lot of the sheen and the merit away from copywriting? Simply because once upon a time, if I have to do a full page ad in the Financial Times or the Sunday Mail or the Telegraph or the Times of India or Wall Street Journal, even though it might be just a main caption and 3 lines of copy, the kind of thinking and the insight and the experience and the conversation that used to happen before such a campaign release used to be kind of really, really, worth, that was a masterclass in itself, right? Yes. Do you see that happening anymore,
Well, I think that most big brands, another way for another word for brand building is making it famous. Kind of the core function of brand building is fame. I buy that because I've seen it and I know the people buy it. And when I wear this thing, I don't have to explain what it is. Everybody knows what it is. It's the number one in the market, or I've seen it, so it must be good. I mean, these are fundamentals of what advertising does. And if the only time you see that message is when it appears on your mobile phone, you have no idea that other people are seeing it. And especially now that we are told that these messages can be tailored only to me. Well, the downside of that, Suresh, is the fact that it's only sent to me, so the 10 million other people who could be seeing it in that scale aren't anymore. So, hey, who are you? Who are you?
Right.
Kind of like you could be, you could be the brand leader, or you could be a guy working out of a garage in Croydon, So yes, there isn't that fame being generated by advertising when all you can see is the damn thing on your 5 centimeter by 8 centimeter screen.
The world has been pixelated.
There isn't that shared moment, that one of the proudest moment of my advertising career was my agency did a campaign for M&G Investments, and we wrote 48 sheet posters, but we wrote 800 words of copy on those 48 sheet posters. I don't think anyone's ever done that, long copy billboards. And I remember when the day they launched, 4 people stood outside opposite a billboard on Blackfriars Station in the city of London, reading the ad, really, not just looking at it, but reading the copy.
In fact, you would recall, in the London Underground, I don't know whether it's the Central Line or the Jubilee Line, Jack Daniels had done across the platform, long copy. Phenomenal. Yes. In fact, you didn't want the train to come because you wanted to read more.
Well, wonderful. Isn't that great?
Yeah, absolutely.
And God bless them for sticking to that.
Absolutely.
I agree with you entirely.
Okay, and finally, before I let you go, Steve, it's been such a stimulating conversation. I just wanted to ask you, who are the people, the books, the situations that have really, really kind of inspired your life and thinking and work?
Oh, as a start, as I said, I started at the age of 30 as a copywriter, a trainee writer at 30. So I had a lot of catching up to do. But I started at Ogilvy, and Ogilvy instilled into you must read. He said, I've seen further because I've stood upon the shoulders of giants, kind of.
Right.
So he was one of the giants. And then I moved on to Bill Bernbach, of course, and then I moved on to a little known writer from that era called John Caples. And he wrote a fabulous book called Tested Advertising Methods. But I suppose the biggest influence on me was a man called Howard Luck Gossage. He worked out of San Francisco in the 1950s and 1960s. He was a copywriter. He ran his own little shop. He never more than 12 people. He'd resign business in order to stay at 12 people. And I suppose I shouldn't say this, but I wrote a book about him called Changing the World is the Only Fit Work for a Grown Man. And I regret it to an extent now, because every bugger I know in the industry thinks that that is their role. Changing the world is the only fit work for a grown man. So I kind of regret, kind of like that title, because everybody who comes into the industry now thinks that that is their raison d'etre. But Gossage was, I'll leave you with this. Gossage said, people read what, you said about the Jack Daniels ads, and I'm sure many people like you many people read them and they would say, but I hate advertising, I hate advertising. But Howard Gossage said, people read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad.
Wow.
Right? So
Wow.
People read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad. So the message there was, try and make your ad as interesting as the content that surrounds it. So if you're writing a press ad, write something that's as interesting as the feature stories, the editorial, the sports reports, the weather forecast, the television news. If you're writing something for the web, write something as try. That's the point, just try, and write something as interesting as the reason why they turned their PC on in the first place. To look at the blogs, the websites, try and write, and that was his. He did many things, but I'll leave that with your readers, listeners. People read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad.
Absolutely.
But what interests them, and this is what John Caples then told us, what interests them is self-interest. What interests them is what's in it for them.
That is being masqueraded.
Sorry.
So that is being currently masqueraded by the digital pundits as WIIFM. What's in it for me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that to make this a cyclic conversation, when it comes around to ESG and corporate social responsibility as a corporate strategy, I think that is admirable and should be embraced. And I'm all for that. But as a marketing strategy, self-interest trumps altruism every time.
Right.
Or pretty much every time. So what's in it for me is fundamental, as opposed to, and you will save the planet. Bugger the planet, what's in it for me? When it comes to me the consumer making a purchase, that I think is, so it's Howard Luck Gossage and John Caples combined is what I would say is a good communication strategy.
Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And before I sign off, this has been stimulating. And sometimes some of your expressions remind me of Michael Atherton, the former England captain, cricket captain.
Yes, really.
Yeah, just especially around the eyes and the eyebrows.
All right.
Okay. Lovely talking to you. We'll be in touch, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you again. I'd love to get hold of more of your magazines if you've got.
Definitely, I will. And what I'll do is, in case you send me your, we believe a lot in WhatsApp in this part of the world. We create lots of nuggets of content. Some of them are tongue in cheek, some of them are purposefully provocative. I'll be happy to share it with them and probably get your views as well.
Please, please, please. But I love reading your brand new. I loved your article about 6 stages of the consumer buying process. I thought it was a masterpiece, if you don't mind me saying.
Much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good luck. And good luck to your mom as well. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.